Let us start our today's presentation with a case clinical study, and it shows that a 60-year-old lady with a 3-year history of diabetes is seen for worsening dyspnea and cough. She has a history of obstructive pulmonary disease (COPD) since age 55. Her dyspnea has increased and she cannot walk for a moderate distance. At the time of her presentation, her diabetic condition is managed with diet and exercise. Her blood pressure is 130 by 70 millimeter of mercury. Pulse is around 100. Respiratory rate is around 25 per minute. Weight 74 kg. Lungs are clear to percussion, but wheezing is present bilaterally. All her laboratory findings are normal and within the range. She started on salbutamol and began on a course of prednisolone at 40 mg per day for 3 days to relieve her respiratory distress, which was tapered over the next 2 weeks. On the 4th day of treatment, she found her blood glucose level to rise to 350 mg per 100 milliliter on routine testing. Now, how do you justify the clinical condition of the patient, and what are going to be the reasonable treatment choice for the same patient? So, find out the answer once I am going to conclude the topic corticosteroid at the end of this session. So, this is a slide showing zona glomerulosa, zona fasciculata, and medulla. So, all parts are being shown over here in this slide, and the respective things which have been synthesized from that particular part is also depicted over that. These adrenals consist of an outer cortex and usually an inner medulla, which are structurally and functionally different from each other. This adrenal cortex consists of 3 zones from without inwards. They are the zona glomerulosa, zona fasciculata, and zona reticularis. Publication of Thomas Addison in 1855 on the clinical picture of adrenal destruction attracted the attention of the physiologist to the importance of this adrenal cortex. And later on, the observation of the relief of symptoms of rheumatoid arthritis during pregnancy led to the use of cortisone in the treatment of Dr. Philip Henck, who received the Nobel Prize in Medicine jointly with Kendall and Reshitin. Usually, this adrenal gland it has an intrinsic relationship with pituitary, and the hypothalamo, pituitary, and adrenal cortex form the HPA axis. ACTH maintains the structure and regulates the function of adrenal cortex. It is secreted by the pituitary basophil cells and is polypeptide with 39 amino acids. The initial 25 amino acids which determine its biological activity are common to the hormone obtained from the cattle, pig, sheep, and man. The arrangement of the remaining 15 amino acids show species variation. Melanocyte stimulating hormone from the anterior pituitary has a sequence of amino acid identical with that of the first 13 of ACTH hormone. Now, whether this ACTH is going to be released or not is going to be decided by a corticotropin releasing hormone, which is formed by hypothalamus, and you can see this at the level of hypothalamus, at the level of CRH, CRH it is stored in the medial eminence, and from there reaches the anterior pituitary via the portal circulation. It stimulates the synthesis and release of ACTH. Now, the serotonin may probably plays an important role in the release of ACTH. Cyproheptadine, which is a serotonin antagonist, inhibits the normal rise of plasma cortisol following insulin-induced hypoglycemia. Furthermore, its oral administration causes a significant depression in the plasma cortisol level. The term cortisol refers to the native hormone of the adrenal cortex present in the biological fluid, whereas the term hydrocortisone is used to refer to the synthetic substance, but they are almost a synonymous substance. The hydrocortisone is used therapeutically. Diurnal fluctuation or variation in the rate of release of ACTH regulate the rates of secretion of cortisol and corticosterone. The plasma level of cortisol modulates the rate of release of CRH, that means cortisol releasing hormone, and in turn that of ACTH, that is adrenocorticotropic hormone, from the anterior pituitary by negative feedback mechanism. Thus, increased plasma level of cortisol inhibits ACTH release and reduces its store in the adenohypophysis. Decreased plasma level of cortisol, as in Addison disease, stimulates ACTH secretion. The delicately balanced mechanism thus regulates the plasma level of cortisol within normal limits. Under very stressful condition, neuronal impulses from higher centers stimulate release of corticotropin releasing hormone, which ultimately elevates the output of cortisol to meet the increased demand of the body. The important homeostatic mechanism which overrides the diurnal variation of ACTH as well as its regulation by plasma cortisol level is deranged in the various disease state and in the functional suppression of hypothalamico-pituitary adrenal axis or complex axis by glucocorticoid administration. The rate of secretion of cortisol is maximum in the early hours in the morning, and you will see this is the adrenal cortex and responsible for synthesis of cortisol. So these three are forming a complex, and this complex formation is actually responsible for the tapering the dose of corticosteroid while doing the pharmacotherapy. Now you will, if you look at this, you will see that these cortisol synthesis is probably seen in the optimal conditions. The cortisol is seen at 8 am in the maximum dose, whereas at the 4 am it's in the almost the minimum dose. Whereas here you will see the aldosterone, which is also seen the rate of secretion is under optimal conditions, but its rate is not fluctuating that much between that time frame. In addition to this CRH, arginine, vasopressin that removes the release of ACTH from the corticotropes, it plays an important role in the full magnitude of the stress response. Now, what are the pharmacological role of ACTH? On the adrenal cortex, stimulates the adrenal cortex to synthesize and secrete cortisol and corticosterone and weak androgens. In hypothalamico hypophysis-tomized animals, this adrenal complex undergoes atrophy and secretion of cortisol is markedly depressed and does not rise in a normal fashion in response to stressful stimuli. Such atrophy can be prevented by administration of ACTH. ACTH stimulates the steroidal synthesis by adrenal cortex by acting on it can stimulate adrenal cortex and the follicular cells, and it is acting on the cell membrane receptors, activating the adenine cyclase system and increasing intracellular cyclic AMP. And furthermore, it accelerates the intracellular conversion of cholesterol to pregnenolone, that is the rate limiting step in the synthesis of adrenocortical steroid. It has its extraadrenal effect. These are less clinical importance and include cutaneous pigmentation, lipolysis, adipose tissue, like that. It is administered intramuscularly, intravenously, well absorbed via intramuscular injection, and the quantitative response in a given dose is greater when it is given in the morning than in the evening by slow IV infusion rather than in IV bolus. Most of the adverse drug reactions we encountered are allergy. Diagnostically, this ACTH can be used. So this is the diagnostic use of a drug where you see the short ACTH stimulation test is performed by injecting 250 microgram of cosinotropin intramuscularly or as IV bolus and measuring plasma cortisol at 60 minutes. A level of 18 microgram per 100 milliliter or higher indicates normal functioning of hypothalamic-pituitary axis. So let's go back to the previous slide. The adrenal cortex is divided into three zones: zona glomerulosa, which synthesizes aldosterone and deoxycorticosterone; zona fasciculata, which secretes cortisol or the glucocorticoid mainly; and zona reticularis, which forms dehydroepiandrosterone and androstenedione, and also stresses of estrogen. Now, chemically, when we look at the things on the basis of chemical structure, the adrenocortical hormone are steroids consisting of cyclopentano phenanthrin ring with various functional groups attached to carbon atoms. All steroid hormones have similar basic structure with minor differences which, however, cause striking alteration in their biological activity. They are sparingly soluble in water and circulate in association with binding protein. All the steroids can be synthesized basically from 2 carbon acetate chains via cholesterol. So cholesterol is the primary the mother structure compound from where these things are synthesized. Now it is converted into pregnenolone, and then from pregnenolone to, you see, it is to pregnenolone, and from pregnenolone to progesterone. Now from progesterone is an intermediary in the synthesis of other steroids and is not secreted by the adrenal cortex. After progesterone, the synthesis pathways are basically for the three groups of hormones separate out, and they are formed and they are not stored in the adrenal cortex in any significant quantities. Administered cortisone is converted in the body to the active compound cortisol. Secretory rate of cortisol is around 10 milligram per day, and that of corticosterone is 2 to 4 milligram per day. So what are the various steps in the synthesis which are being governed by specific enzymes? You'll see that in one way deoxycorticosterone, then the corticosterone, then it's coming to aldosterone. So aldosterone is important one for retaining sodium and the excretion of potassium, whereas the 7 alpha hydroxyprogesterone, it is forming the cortisol, which is basically synonymous with hydrocortisone, is a metabolic measured as 7 ketogenic steroids. And on the other hand, via androstenedione, it is forming 17 ketosteroids, and at the end, from androstenedione, it is ultimately going to the other direction and is forming sex steroids like testosterone and estrogens. So this is basically the synthetic pathway of this different corticosteroids. The steroidal synthesis can be reduced by metyrapone, which selectively inhibits synthesis of cortisol and corticosterone, and it was used for testing adrenal function. It can be reduced by aminoglutathione, which acts by blocking the conversion of cholesterol to pregnenolone. So this is the action of aminoglutathione. Ketoconazole is an antifungal agent which is basically a non-selective inhibitor of adrenal and gonadal steroidal synthesis, used sometimes in Cushing syndrome. Mitotan, it's an anti-cancer drug which causes necrosis of the adrenal cortex. Mifepristone, an antiprogestin which in large doses block glucocorticoid receptors, and it has been used in Cushing syndrome due to adrenal carcinoma. The last one is cyproheptadine and etomidate. These are steroidogenesis inhibitors and useful in treating hypercorticism. So when we are looking at the mechanism of action of glucocorticoids, the important glucocorticoid secreted in man is cortisol. It has some mineralocorticoid activity, since the pharmacological actions of hydrocortisone are in fact its physiological actions. They are discussed together. Mechanism of actions basically it's act by complex mechanism, it involving cytosolic nuclear receptor mediated action. And you see the membrane bound, you just see the receptor is bound with heat shock protein and immunophilin. When the steroid is coming inside this cytoplasm, these all are separated, and this is immunophilin, and this steroid is binding with GR. That means the glucocorticoid receptor, and the whole thing is internalized. And there is a specific element called glucocorticoid response element. Now the gray ones are called introns and the orange ones are extrons. And then during this transcription process, these introns are separated and extrons are binding with each other and help in the formation of mRNA. And this ultimately leads to translation and formation of a new protein. So this is the way by which the glucocorticoids act at the level of the molecular level. Mostly the glucocorticoid receptor is also staying with other receptors like A, D, the receptors like estrogen, progesterone, thyroid. They are usually being conglomerated and staying together with heat shock protein, immunophilin, and heat shock protein 90. There are different pharmacological actions which we have been observing with glucocorticoids, and those are basically their effect on carbohydrate and protein metabolism, where they inhibit peripheral utilization of glucose by skeletal muscle, inhibit the incorporation of amino acid into protein in the peripheral tissue, promote the conversion of amino acids in the glucose into glucose in the liver. All these steps basically help to maintain adequate glucose supply in the brain. Basically, in physiological doses, they stimulate protein and RNA synthesis in the liver, and large supraphysiological dose cause catabolic and anti-anabolic effects in the skin, muscle, and lymphoid tissue. Whereas in the fat metabolism, it has a permissive role. Prolonged administration of excessive glucocorticoid causes redistribution of body fat with a loss of loss from the extremities and a deposition in the neck, and that is called buffalo hump, seen in Cushing syndrome. And the supraclavicular area and face is like a moon, so it's called moon faces. Electrolyte and water metabolism is also disturbed, so it's a relatively weak salt retaining and potassium wasting effect. And normally we see that physiologically is essential for excreting a water load. In pharmacological doses, it will antagonize the action of vitamin D on the gut and reduce absorption of calcium. And large doses for prolonged period may interfere with the development of cartilage and inhibit linear growth in children. Due to that, the protein catabolic action, glucocorticoids inhibit formation of newborn tissue. In the cardiovascular system, The changes which occur is in adrenal insufficiency and partly due to mineralocorticoid deficiency. And in the muscles, we will see that permissive concentration of cortisol is necessary for the normal functioning of the skeletal muscles. The muscular weakness is an important feature of Addison's disease. In cardiovascular system, this glucocorticoid potentiate the pressure response of the blood vessels to adrenaline and noradrenaline. It is called kind of permissive effect by upregulating the adrenergic receptors in the vessel wall, and in pharmacological doses they have a positive inotropic action on the heart. Absence of this leads to increase in capillary permeability and inadequate vasomotor response of similar blood vessels and reduction in the cardiac output. In the muscles, as I mentioned before, the problem lies when the weakness of hypercortisolism is due to hypokalemia, and it may lead to muscle wasting or steroid myopathy. Central nervous system is affected, mostly in case of Addison's disease. Apathy, depression is very common, but the pharmacological doses may show mood elevation, euphoria, nervousness, and even psychosis and depression. Anti-inflammatory action of glucocorticoid is very common, and we know that it stops the first enzyme phospholipase A2, the very beginning, and preventing the formation of arachidonic acid from membrane phospholipid, and ultimately it is preventing synthesis of both prostaglandin and leukotriene formation. So, its anti-inflammatory action is based on the fact that it is suppressing both the formation of prostaglandin and leukotriene, inhibits leukocyte migration into the inflamed tissues, suppression of pro-inflammatory cytokines and neurokines, decrease capillary permeability by reducing the amount of histamine released by the basophilial mast cells, stabilization of lysosomal membranes at high concentration, thus preventing the spillage of hydrolytic enzymes, and it will minimize the chemotaxis and lysosomal enzyme synthesis by neutrophils and monocytes. It has a predominant immunosuppressive and anti-allergic action. And how does it effective in this way? It effective by inhibiting the function of macrophage, reduce their ability to respond to antigen, inhibit the activation of cytotoxic T lymphocyte, cause lysis of the T lymphocyte, inhibit the effects of the complement system. It suppress cell mediated immunity hypersensitivity reaction, and it prevent homograft rejection. So, large doses diminish the effective concentration of specific IgG antibodies. Here the name of few of the corticosteroids were given, and out of this the dexamethasone and betamethasone are the most potent one, and the potency is based on the anti-inflammatory property. So, you just see that almost 4 to 5 milligram of prednisolone is equivalent to 25 milligram. So, the ratio is around 1:5. Similarly, 1 milligram of hydrocortisone is equivalent to 5 milligram of prednisolone. So, the dose regulation would be like that. But in the acute case, as hydrocortisone is just like our body steroid cortisol, we always prefer hydrocortisone to tackle a case of acute crisis. Glucocorticoids do not in moderate doses interfere with antibody production or with antigen antibody union, and nor with the liberation of histamine. Now, whenever we are talking about pharmacotherapy and precaution, we have mentioned 4 types of therapy which we are commonly prescribed in case of corticosteroid based regimen. One is called pulse therapy, the second one is intensive short term. We are more concerned about the prolonged high dose suppressive therapy, and the last one is low dose chronic palliative therapy. So, whenever we are talking about the prolonged high dose suppressive therapy, we are concerned about inhibition of hypothalamic or pituitary axis. Supraphysiological doses of glucocorticoid for longer than 1 week suppress the HPA axis and cause adrenocortical atrophy. Such patients during therapy and for long periods thereafter are unable to increase the endogenous cortisol output in response to stress. During this period, the pituitary function recovers initially, plasma ACTH progressively reaches supranormal level in 4 to 5 months. Only then the atrophic adrenal cortex starts recovering its function. But it can take the HPA axis as long as 8 to 12 months to be able to respond normally to stress. The recovery of HPA axis is not accelerated by administration of exogenous ACTH. However, physiological doses of a glucocorticoid, it may be 20 mg of hydrocortisone or 5 mg of prednisolone, that is the equivalent dose, may be used for prolonged period after cessation of prolonged long-term large dose glucocorticoid therapy without interfering with the recovery of HPA axis. So, the dose of glucocorticoid should be tapered off gradually, and patient shouldn't encounter this kind of acute adrenal insufficiency or hypothalamico-pituitary adrenal axis suppression. Patients on long-term glucocorticoid treatment should be considered to be suffering from these kind of problems like adrenal insufficiency, and it may lead to adrenal crisis. Patients who are on small doses of any glucocorticoid and those who are in high doses of intermediate acting glucocorticoid like prednisolone or methylprednisolone on alternate day basis show little or no suppression of this axis. When large doses are used daily for prolonged period, the suppression is mostly marked. But that doesn't mean that alternate day regimen should be considered each and every time, and this is not going to cause any kind of harmful effect on this axis. Because of their very prolonged action, the long-term glucocorticoids are not suitable for alternate day administration. The long-acting compounds such as dexamethasone, betamethasone, however, are eminently suited for uniform and continuous suppression of ACTH secretion. And the peak secretion of ACTH occurs at night. The entire daily dose of the long-acting glucocorticoid should be given at bedtime. During minor stress such as febrile illness, exercise, bouts of gastroenteritis, 100 mg of if the normal adrenals respond by secreting around 100 mg of hydrocortisone per day, that means the cortisol. This then is the requirement of hydrocortisone during such situations. And during major stress such as major surgery, burn, myocardial infarction, 300 to 400 mg of cortisol can be met with by giving 100 mg IV infusion every 6 to 8 hours on the very first day. From the next day onwards, the doses can be halved. While withdrawing the long-term glucocorticoid therapy, the reduction usually is done in such a manner that you reduce it by 10 milligram each and every week, so that a flare-up of the disease under treatment shouldn't happen, and non-specific withdrawal syndrome comprising of fever, malaise, myalgia, arthralgia may not be manifested in this case. After reaching the physiological maintenance dose, it should be continued up to 1 year in order to allow the HPA axis to recover or function properly. Patients undergoing surgery should always be asked for history of glucocorticoid therapy during the past 1 year. The oral bioavailability is around 50% and variable on administration of an enema. Cortisone acts in the body after conversion to hydrocortisone and prednisone to prednisolone in the liver. Hydrocortisone is high protein bound and plasma, so is prednisolone. Dexamethasone is less protein bound than hydrocortisone. The placenta metabolizes hydrocortisone and the prednisolone to the inactive cortisone and prednisone. Unlike the mother, fetus cannot convert cortisone to prednisolone to hydrocortisone and prednisolone. By contrast, dexamethasone and betamethasone cross the placenta to achieve high concentration in the fetal circulation and suppress the fetal hypothalamic-pituitary axis. Therefore, in a pregnant woman needs treatment with a glucocorticoid, and prednisolone is preferred over there for the maturation of lung or for any other causes. Single large dose of prednisolone or equivalent dose of any glucocorticoids are generally harmless. So, you can safely prescribe that. Short term therapy for 1 week, especially given in case of bronchial asthma, acute bronchial asthma or chronic bronchial asthma, the most severe variety, grade 4 or 5. So, in that case, that is also not going to be harmful, and you need not have to taper it off. Prolonged therapy with glucocorticoids in doses higher than 20 to 30 milligram of hydrocortisone in equivalent doses of other steroids per day is liable to cause adverse effects. Hence, this is the generally recommended maximum maintenance dose in prolonged glucocorticoid therapy. The only exception is life-threatening conditions where dose is large enough to suppress the clinical manifestation of the disease are needed. The important adverse effect which mostly we encounter, gastritis may lead to peptic ulcer, peptic and it's mostly happened when it's combined with NSAIDs. The endocrine system, the Cushing's like feature, the metabolic effects like the clinical manifestations of ketoacidosis, non-ketotic acidosis, hyperosmolar coma, idiopathic diabetes mellitus can be precipitated. So, these are all the problems with steroids. Suppression of inflammation and immunosuppression will lead to chance of superinfection and opportunistic infection. The retardation of linear growth occurs in children with high doses. CNS is basically readily, the glucocorticoids readily enter the brain and can influence mood, sleep patterns and EEG patterns. So, the psychotic reactions may occur especially during intensive therapy. Proximal myopathy, osteoporosis are common with compression fractures. Eyes may lead to posterior cataract, whereas posterior subscapular cataract as well as glaucoma may occur with some patients. Inhibition of hypothalamic-pituitary axis, which already been discussed, is a very common adverse drug reaction of any of the form of these medications. So, in brief, this is the first part of the series of corticosteroids, and predominantly we have discussed glucocorticoids, and a part is already being covered with skin and antifungal drug, that is topical glucocorticoids. So, in the next presentation we will discuss its therapeutic uses or different forms of therapy. Once more we will give stress on that. Therapeutic uses both on the replacement therapy as well as the life-saving therapies, and we will try to conclude our second part of presentation with a little bit of discussion on different types of aldosteronism. So, thank you so much for giving attention to the first part of my series, corticosteroid.